Has come. Let's go ahead and start the Transportation Bicycle Pedestrian Safety Committee. Can we have a roll call, Michael?
Council Member Michelle, or Committee Member Michelle. Committee Member Siebel.
Here.
Committee Member Owen.
Here.
And Committee Chair Lugers.
Here.
Committee Member Jones is currently absent, but expected to join the meeting at some point.
Great. If you can note also that the council member liaison is not Bill Widmer.
That is correct. The that was not changed when the agenda was published, but okay. Both of our council liaisons are here tonight.
Okay. All right. The first item is public comments that are not on the agenda. If anyone wants to speak, please do so now. Okay, we'll close public comments for that. And then the agenda items, we start with separate the yes, approval of the minutes for November 18th.
Move to approve.
Yeah, it would seem that those minutes were never completed, so they'll have to be approved at a future meeting.
Okay, very good. All right, we'll move on to the second item, which is a presentation by Samtrans.
Hey, good evening, committee members. My name is Millie Tollison. I'm the Director of Planning at Samtrans, and I'm really happy to be with you this evening to give you an update on a project that we're calling Reimagine Dumbarton. Next slide, please. So our agenda tonight, I just have a brief slide deck. We'll go over a summary, a brief overview of the study, why we're excited about this project, and the ways that the community is being engaged throughout the project. Slide, please. Okay, so for a bit of background and just context setting, for the purposes of this study, we are looking at the Dumbarton Rail Corridor, but just the peninsula side. So we're looking at the 5 mile or so long, largely inactive rail corridor between University Avenue in East Palo Alto and Redwood City Transit Center will be the extent of the project. And, you know, if you lived in this area for a while, you know that there is a bit of a history to this corridor. The district, the San Mateo County Transit District, actually acquired the land in the early 1990s. Union Pacific Railroad still holds some trackage rights on the corridor. But since the 90s, it has been the subject of multiple studies of how to sort of repurpose or reimagine the corridor. You can see on this slide an aerial shot of the corridor today, which I think is pretty instructive in terms of what much of the corridor is like today. It's quite overgrown with vegetation, obviously a lot of potential there beyond what it is today. And over the years, it has been studied for heavy passenger rail, regional rail, and all of the studies have highlighted some consistent themes that we're trying to bring into this work, which is desires for better local connectivity, including emphasis on opportunities to use the corridor to make safer and more pleasant walking and bicycling infrastructure. A lot of requests for more crossings. Right now, the corridor is a barrier in many areas between communities. We're always asked at Samtrans for faster, more reliable transit, and of course, near-term and cost-effective solutions are part of what we're seeking. Next slide. So this is, again, a map of our study area. So the red line that you see on the map is the corridor that we're focused on. Again, University Avenue in East Palo Alto through the Bellhaven community, through Menlo Park, the Marsh Road area in terms of the commercial and employment areas near there. And then moving through North Fair Oaks into Redwood City, ultimately trying to make that connection into the Redwood City Transit Center and Caltrain Station. And the Reimagine Dumbarton project is envisioning converting the rail corridor into a rapid bus line with additional walking and bicycling connections along the corridor and across the corridor. So this is a feasibility study. So what we're doing is we're really assessing the feasibility and the community interest in such a vision. With that community input, we'll be refining the vision and the project proposal to address both community needs and technical constraints, and developing a project that we hope will ultimately move forward into further design and construction. Next slide. So this is our schedule just for the feasibility study. We just are wrapping up the first round of community engagement. So we're presenting to various commissions and committees such as yourselves, and really hoping to hear input on the transportation needs and priorities of the communities that are near the corridor. This spring, we'll be using everything we learned to identify and develop our project alternatives, which are essentially just going to be 4 different design concepts for the corridor. Later this summer into the fall, we do plan to come back out to the community and be able to share those alternatives so people can really start to see what this could look like. And we'll be seeking input at that point, followed by selecting our preferred project design alternative. And then about a year from now, hoping to wrap up the feasibility study with an implementation plan. Slide. So want to share that we are trying to be really focused on a few principles, guiding principles as part of this work. We really want to design a project that is fundable, really rooted in the realities of our current funding landscape, federally, state, locally, or regionally and locally. Money for mega transportation projects is just few and far between at this point. So we are trying to be really focused on a cost-effective project that is, again, second one here is implementable. We're really wanting to be intentional about delivering improvements on this corridor. We know this has been studied multiple times already, and the community is quite eager for improvements. We want to be, of course, responsive to what we've heard from the community and effective in terms of meeting current and future travel demand needs. Slide. So why are we excited about this project? And maybe even before that, starting a little bit with what is a busway, what is a rapid bus line? So we don't have those graphics that really speak 1,000 words yet. We're excited about having those in a few months. But in the meantime, we like to share some examples from around the country, different contexts here, obviously. But one down in LA that is a super successful bus-based project. It connects to other rail services and does include a parallel bike path. The photo in the middle, I think, is probably the closest context to what we have here in the peninsula. This is in Minneapolis. It's a 2.5 mile long busway that's limited to buses, bicycles, and emergency vehicles. And I think that the possibility of incorporating emergency vehicles into our busway is a really interesting concept, supporting emergency vehicles, obviously, in our communities getting where they need to go, not getting stuck in traffic, could be a really great co-benefit to this project. And then the other one on the right is a little bit in our backyard. It's down in Monterey. It's called the Surf Line, and it's actually in construction now. So we're closely monitoring their project and looking forward to going down and riding it in a couple of years. Next slide. So some of the benefits that we see to this project is really the possibility of putting in fast, reliable transit service. This service would be really high quality with stations and would be able to move very quickly and reliably in a way that a lot of Samtrans transit service cannot do because it's subject to being traffic with other cars. So this service would be able to be really fast, competitive with driving and appealing, we think, to a lot of riders. Has the potential to improve connections. This service would connect to Caltrain, supporting people in East Palo Alto, Menlo Park getting to the train. Advancing equity, this study area is lined by multiple Samtrans equity priority areas, so it's a very important place for us to invest. Excited about the potential to undertake that near-term implementation and the compatibility with active transportation, which we know the community is desiring more safe places to bike and walk. This project would support environmental justice. It would be operated with zero emission vehicles, so no tailpipe emissions, cost effective, ready for partnerships and to be competitive for grant funding. And it does not preclude a future regional rail service in the future. So if the region wants to, and Samtrans wants to convert this into a regional rail service in the future, this would not preclude such a thing, but it would allow us to make improvements in the near term. Slide. So just sharing with you that we're using a lot of data in this project, really trying to be mindful of how we can, again, meet the travel needs that folks have today and in the future. Because as growth does happen in the study area, the best way to ensure that traffic doesn't just get worse and worse and worse is to invest in alternative modes for folks to use, such as transit and active transportation. And we're also excited about the possibility of regional buses using this. Perhaps the Dumbarton Express could use it and make connections all the way over into the East Bay as well for the peninsula. Next slide. And just emphasizing, this does have the opportunity and flexibility to integrate with recreation, with active transportation. And we're also hearing a lot of interest in other uses like small park spaces, play areas, little dog parks. So the community is really getting creative and we love that. And we're excited to try and incorporate as many, even maybe transportation sort of adjacent uses such as picnic tables or play spaces as well as space allows. Slide. Okay, so just a reminder about our outreach. So again, we are just wrapping up our first phase of engagement. We did a lot of pop-up events. We did a pop-up at the Atherton Library, and we've heard from over 1,000 people so far during this round of outreach. We then will be back in summer, fall with, I think, again, a really exciting milestone of being able to share more graphics and visuals of what this could look like and the different alternatives. And then in the winter, coming back out to share with the community what we did with all of the input that we heard and the direction that our board and other decision makers want to go as far as the preferred alternative. Okay, last slide here is just emphasizing that we are really doing all the things when it comes to outreach in order to try and get as much input as we can. We did 2 community meetings in the last phase. We'll do more community meetings in the summer, pop-up events, partnerships with community-based organizations, road shows to commissions and committees such as yourselves, all of the online mediums to try and get the word out. briefings, and we will be doing summaries at the end of each outreach phase, so to report out on what we heard. The end of my slides. Happy to take any comments or questions.
Okay, anybody comments or questions? Oh, we'll get to that first. Yeah, we'll get to that. I have a question. It seems like this is a bus route, a rapid bus route, and it might trigger SB 79 to East Palo Alto, Menlo Park, and Atherton. And I would think that you would get strong resistance to that. There isn't a change in the law.
So what I will tell you is that we are certainly tracking and aware of what you're referring to. We're actively monitoring the action in the legislature that may result in some cleanups to the bill. And we're also still assessing what characteristics of this project might trigger that for different communities. We're actively talking to staff to understand the implications. And we're getting input. We are hearing about it a bit. Not in every forum, of course, that we're going out into, but I think at this point, I can only say that we're aware of what you're referring to, and we're tracking it closely, and we want to be transparent. We want to be in communication about the impacts.
Anybody have a question from public comment?
Tons of questions, but I think we're early in the phase. Speed bus next to small community parks. Anxious to see how this plays out. Things can peacefully coexist, and seems to be relatively narrow stretch of land.
So the right of way is 100 feet wide, in case that's useful to know. It's actually fairly wide. And I think when we talk about high speed bus, I do want to make sure it's not a freeway. We're not envisioning a freeway. But even a service that can go 20 miles an hour, not in traffic, can get where it's going fairly quickly, right? So I don't want to, I say fast, but relative to people
Unencumbered by
biking.
traffic.
Yeah.
What's the overall length of what you're proposing? I guess it ends in the bay, not far in East Palo Alto and Redwood City.
It's about 5 miles long.
Can we go back to the map, please?
It's
This one. Thank you. That one.
Yes, so the extents are University Avenue at the southernmost point, or there, thereabouts. And you're right that south of there, the corridor goes off toward the bay, but that's where our service would end and would be able to connect to the Bay Trail. There's Bay Trail access right there, which I think would be great for people bicycling, walking. And then connecting in at Redwood City Transit Center. The reason that there's that blue arrow is we're not entirely sure what that connection will look like yet.
That's where I was
okay.
headed with asking about the map. It's like,
Yeah.
So does this connect or does it not connect?
It will connect to Redwood City Transit Center, but most likely on either Middlefield Road or El Camino Real, because what happens there where the red ends is it comes in with Caltrain, and that's just very active rail tracks,
Substation.
Obviously. Just a bit too tricky to coexist there in the Caltrain tracks. So the bus will have to hop off and make its way to the transit center in Redwood City on surface streets.
Transit Center is Sequoia Station.
Yes.
So what is the methodology? I'm new to all this. What is the methodology to measure current traffic along that path and anticipated demand that this will be meeting?
Yes, so we're going to be doing ridership modeling this summer. We'll develop our project alternatives, and then we'll model the projected ridership of the service. Based on those different alternatives, it will incorporate forecasted growth, like we were talking about near the corridor, and it will make some assumptions based on current transit use and other modes, of other modes of how many people would be likely to use this service. And I think we'll be able to bring that back out in the fall.
And there's nothing for it to logically connect to at the east end terminus of this. Quite obviously where it would be indicated, but
Well, one thing that we're exploring for the bus service is to come down further into East Palo Alto. So we don't necessarily think that the service will necessarily just end right there. We're exploring how to bring it down into the parts of East Palo Alto that are a bit more dense, obviously, and have more ridership potential.
We're on University.
It is as University is nearing Bayshore. So it's east of Bay Road. It's pretty far toward the bay. It just happens to be the way the corridor
I don't know.
runs. Oh, Bayfront. I'm sorry. Yeah, not Bay.
I knew what you meant.
Yeah. Bayshore, I guess, is 101.
The other, yeah.
Anything else from, go ahead.
So we continue to, of course, know that that has to be addressed at some point and has also a lot of potential. The cost of a regional rail project is more than $3.5 billion, and the cost of this project is substantially less than that and could be delivered sooner. So, like I said, we're seeing it as like a phased sort of approach and proof of concept in some ways to see it's used.
Okay, let's move to public comments. Anyone in the audience? Please come up to the microphone, please, and introduce yourself.
Is this affected at all by
you need-
high speed?
you need-
Woody Shackleton, a little bit Atherton, does this have anything to do with like high speed rails that can affect this? If high speed rail actually makes it up this way? That how they're tying it?
Understanding is that high-speed rail is going to share tracks with the train tracks. So yet another reason to not try and share tracks with them. And that's why I think when we get up, when the red line reaches that point, we'll be off on streets.
I know we have one online. Anybody else? Okay, let's do the online.
I think this is probably a public comment for me. This is Rick DeGoli. I have a public comment. I think the issue that was raised at the committee regarding SB 79 is extremely important. This is a great project and it absolutely should be able to go through. But if it inadvertently enables 7-story apartment buildings to be built anywhere within a quarter mile of a stop under SB 79, that's a disaster. And I think there'll be a very strong amount of opposition from those single-family resident communities that don't want to have 7-story apartment buildings imposed on them because we do a much-needed bus line. That's a really critical issue. I hope that you take that very seriously.
Through the
That's all
chair.
we have online? Okay,
Um,
we'll close.
Chair Lugers, may I make a comment? Elizabeth Lewis, your liaison. So, regarding following up what Councilmember DeGoya brought up about SB 79, that is a very, very serious issue that we all need to look at. In fact, our city manager wrote a very strong letter to that effect to our representatives in the legislature just like yesterday, today. Also, the executive director of the CCAG organization, County City Government Association, that I'm on the board of, we all approved a very, very strongly worded letter to be sent to our representatives saying that the BRT along rulings of the SB 79 would have to be removed completely from this project, just categorically, because we just cannot put our residents at risk. So I think there's going to be some outreach that will make a significant change. Are you aware of that? Yeah. So I think it's a great project. My other question, that wasn't a question, that was a statement, is how do people get to the stops? How many stops are there? I know Stacy showed me on her phone, there are like 5 different stops, are there? And are there parking areas that will be provided for people and bathrooms and things like that?
So we actually haven't identified stops yet. So that will come in the summertime. When we have the project alternatives, we'll be ready to show where the proposed stops will be. But the rule of thumb for these types of projects is stop every quarter to half mile or so is sort of the rule of thumb. We are so far not planning for any parking, but we are wanting to work really closely with our neighbor jurisdictions on making sure that there's good connectivity to the facility for bikes and for people walking. And happy to incorporate that into the project to help with funding and being really competitive for grants. And I think the comment about restrooms is a good one. I think we're hearing a lot about really wanting to make sure that we don't skimp on lighting and other kind of safety elements as well. So really want to put together a very high quality project.
All right, no other public comments. We'll go ahead and close public comments and back to the committee. Is there any discussion or just accept the? We need to do anything like accept the presentation or just, okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
everyone.
Millie.
Thank you for your time.
All right, the next item is the active transportation plan.
Thank you, Chair, members of the committee. We're happy to come back to you tonight with an update on the active transportation plan. I think our last presentation to you was in September, right before we started our second phase of public outreach. And so in this presentation, we're going to go through kind of the project timeline, where we are, give you an overview of what we heard during that second outreach phase where we presented various concepts and alternatives to the public, the kind of feedback that we received. Coming from that, some recommendations with regards to bicycle, pedestrian, and intersection improvements, as well as some program and policy recommendations for consideration and feedback. And as always, questions, discussions, and feedback are appreciated as we go through the presentation. Just, I wanted to highlight some areas for you to think about as we go through the presentation and some guided feedback that would really help us as we move forward towards getting a draft document prepared. And so those are, again, the general network recommendations, where and what type of facilities we want on the different streets with relation to bicycle and pedestrian activity in town. And then something to keep in mind is the need or desire for east-west connectivity in town. As you know, there's only a couple of streets that actually go from El Camino to Alameda. One we share right now with Menlo Park, that's Valparaiso. The next is Atherton Avenue, and then the last one is Stockbridge. These streets can't really fit everything, or may not be able to fit everything in. And so what we want is some guided feedback with regards to what that east-west connectivity looks like, whether we should have pedestrian facilities on one street, bike facilities, bike lanes on another, or a couple other alternatives that we'll be presenting and that were outlined in your staff report. And then there's some policy recommendations and programmatic things that we can do to educate the public and really make active transportation thrive a little more in town. And then kind of following on that, we have some guidelines, we have some requirements in our municipal code with regards to frontages and what we, as the town, allow folks to do along those frontages. And so some consideration as to whether or not we want to look at making some changes to that to, again, kind of facilitate the opportunities for mobility, and any other feedback that that we can get from you. I'm going to be introducing, I'm sorry, I should have introduced at the beginning of the meeting. On the line, we have Asher Cohn from M Group, who is assisting the town as project manager. And then here with us tonight for the presentation, we have Sam Corbett and Charlie Simpson with Alta Planning and Design. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Charlie, who's going to continue the presentation. Hit the button.
Thank you, Robert. As he mentioned, my name's Charlie Simpson. I'm associate planner with Alta Planning Design, and I've been the assistant project manager on this project. And so I'll first start with the project timeline. We last met with you all September 30th, and at that meeting, we presented the existing conditions and also our initial draft recommendations before we brought it to the public. And then since then, we have done our second phase of engagement, shown the public our draft recommendations, and then updated them based upon that engagement. And then now we are working into finalizing the recommendations, and starting on implementation strategy, which includes prioritizing the projects and doing some planning level cost estimates. And finally, those up to five top priority projects, we will create some concept designs as well. And then we will be wrapping up the plan this summer. Next slide. So yeah, as I mentioned since we last met, just really quickly, we completed a pop-up event, 3 neighborhood-focused meetings, an online survey. We had a number of email comments as well. We have then updated our recommendations and also drafted some recommended policies and programs and started in on our methodology for prioritizing projects. Next slide. So I will give an overview of what we did for the second engagement phase. So between October 30th and November 30th, 1 month, that was the duration of the second phase of outreach. We did a pop-up event here for the Halloween Spooktacular. We had a series of boards showing the draft recommendations. We had about 25 participants there. We had 3 kind of neighborhood, smaller focus meetings in here as well. One of those meetings was focused on residents that live west of Middlefield and east of Alameda de los Pulgas. And we had another meeting that was focused on Atherton Avenue residents, and another third subgroup, which was east of Middlefield. And then we had about 40 participants across those 3. We also had an online survey with 185 responses, the majority of which were Atherton residents. And then, as I mentioned, email comments. Next slide. So just at a very high level across the different engagement methods, we heard, here's a number of themes that we heard. So in the survey and in a lot of our engagement, we showed 3 different alternatives that could be used for the neighborhood local streets. And on those alternatives, one of the design features was some traffic calming. Specifically, we showed chicanes, which is a countermeasure that kind of forces cars to slow down and kind of slowly weave through the street. And so we definitely got a lot of negative feedback on those. We had generally more support for pedestrian improvements than bike improvements, although some specific support for bike improvements along Atherton Avenue and also along Middlefield Road. We had support for improvements along routes to school, again, Middlefield and Encinal in particular. Support for biking and walking improvements along Atherton Ave. And then strong opposition to bike lanes along Selby Lane. We also had support for walkways along a number of streets. So I say walkway as opposed to sidewalk. A walkway is not a concrete normal sidewalk. It is uses a more natural material and such as like crushed gravel, but is still a consistent surface treatment. And we also had support for a number of intersection improvements to assist people with crossing the street. I'll go into more detail in each of these in future slides. Next slide. So for in-person engagements, I already talked about this a little bit. We had 3 neighborhood meetings, 1 pop-up. We engaged 65 participants and collected 90 comments and/or votes. Next slide. And in the online survey, 185 responses, 67% were Atherton residents. And the survey focused on these 3 alternatives for Selby Lane, Stockbridge Avenue, and Atherton Avenue. And we also allowed the public to kind of write in their recommendation if they'd like to see any of these alternatives on all the streets or another street in Atherton that wasn't mentioned. And so just really quickly, so just to start with alternative 1, this shows, I'll just say across 2 of the alternatives, we show what we call bicycle boulevards, which we showed this committee last time. But we got through this survey process and other outreach, some negative feedback on a number of the traffic calming elements of a bicycle boulevard, such as the chicane shown in this image. And so as a response to that feedback, we have scaled back our recommendations a little bit and adapted them to now just, instead of recommending bicycle boulevards, which is a neighborhood street that has traffic calming, wayfinding, and prioritizes bicyclists on local roadways through a number of things such as that. We now just recommend class 3 bicycle routes such as already exist on a number of local roadways that have signage and then the stencil Sharrow on the road. Alternative 2 here shows a bicycle boulevard and a walkway. This had a lot of mixed feedback, and you can see 63% didn't want this alternative on any of the streets. Next slide. This alternative 3 shows bike lanes and some what we're calling, bioretention features, or just vegetation, stormwater management features as well. And this had also some mixed feedback, but slightly more support for bike lanes on Atherton Avenue through this survey. Next slide. And so with public and email comments, we received 25. And the top themes from those were opposition to bike lanes on Selby Lane, a number of requests for sidewalks or walkways. For example, along Selby Lane, most of the residents in that neighborhood focus meeting that we had on Selby Lane residents, they didn't want bike lanes, but a lot of them were in favor of a walkway. And then we had, instead of chicanes, there were a lot of concerns about chicanes. We had some comments that expressed support for speed humps or speed bumps. And then there's a perception of low bicycle ridership in Atherton, concerns about poor drainage along some of the streets and how our recommendations might affect those. And then just safety improvements near schools was requested as well. Next slide.
Sorry, before we move on, are there any questions from the committee on the public outreach?
I have.
I say, because there's a lot of information, and
Right.
so if you have questions, it's
Right.
better to kind of break it up just a little bit.
What's the difference between a class 3 and a class 3B? Because that's listed on in the document.
Yeah, class 3 is the bicycle route just with the wayfinding and the Sharrows. And then a class 3B is the bicycle boulevard, which essentially takes that a step further and has diverters or traffic calming and a little bit more other elements to slow down traffic and prioritize bicyclists. And we, again, in our updated recommendations, we do not have any bicycle boulevard or class 3B recommendations.
I also noticed in the document, it talks about level of stress on various streets. And how do you measure the level of stress?
So the level of stress was analysis was completed during the existing conditions. And level of stress is just one indicator using a variety of factors of how comfortable or stressful a potential rider might feel on any given street. And some of the factors that influence that are speed limit, number of vehicles, average daily traffic, and then also looking at the existence of infrastructure or not. There's a number of other factors as well, but it's just one indicator that we used in addition to our collision analysis and community engagement to inform and get an idea of the existing conditions on streets.
And I guess you're limited by the rules that the only neighborhood that has sidewalks is considered a high level of stress.
Yeah, we did note that in the, that was an interesting finding that we had from the pedestrian level of traffic stress. And that's why we take the results of that analysis with a grain of salt, and it's not the only thing that we look at, for example, when we're coming up with recommendations. Yeah.
So when you're doing this level of stress, are you also looking at the number of pedestrians and bicyclists that are using this street?
Not in the level of traffic stress analysis, but we did, the town conducted a bicycle and pedestrian count this past summer, I believe it was, that we also used in our analysis to kind of get it, just a snapshot of where people were biking and walking.
So
Through the chair.
I'm sorry.
If you don't mind. We're going to get to the network recommendations and we're happy to take questions about that. I just wanted to take the break here as we got through the public feedback portion to see if there were any questions regarding the public outreach. And if there aren't, then we can move on and Charlie go into the recommendations that followed the public outreach.
Does anybody else have questions on the aforementioned things? Okay. Press on.
Thank you. Sorry, you will have opportunity to
Oh,
ask your
yeah.
questions. It's just, you're getting into kind of the detail on how recommendations kind of were brought forward and we're happy to answer those. But if there were questions on the public feedback, I didn't want to wait till the end. And so Charlie will go through the draft recommendations now.
All right. So yeah, first I'll talk about the recommended pedestrian facilities. And our focus overall with those was a lot of walkway recommendations. Again, not sidewalks, but walkways. And those focused on, where there weren't any areas to walk along the main roadways and especially in proximity to schools. We looked at high injury locations and any areas with on the edges of town where there were high rider transit stops that would, in a sense, trigger sidewalks near those stops. And then we also recommended a number of intersection improvements. And because those intersection improvements will require a more detailed engineering judgment and review to come up with a specific recommendation on each intersection, we kept things at a high level and grouped the intersection recommendations into 3 groups, or what we call typologies, based on the type of roadway and the conditions we saw at that intersection. So there's generally 3 groups or types of intersection improvements: crossing and accessibility improvements, such as crosswalks, roadway improvements. So this could be along like a pedestrian refuge island or curb ramps, anything that requires physical concrete construction along a roadway. And then curb extensions as well as another option there. And then traffic control improvements. So this could be an always stop, signal timing changes, a rectangular rapid flashing beacon, things like that. And any one intersection could have multiple of these groups assigned to it. Next slide. I'll first talk about the linear pedestrian facilities. There's a small segment of a shared use path that we're proposing along Marsh Road on top of the water channel there. And that's the only kind of shared use path or class 1 facility that we're recommending. And then we are recommending walkways on one side of the street and also sidewalks on one side of the street. Next slide. And then here's a map of those linear pedestrian recommendations. So the walkways and the sidewalks on one side of the street. Yeah, and I can go into detail about a couple, but I'll just provide a couple examples. You see Selby Lane has a walkway on one side of the street. Atherton Avenue has a walkway on one side of the street that we're recommending. As well as Middlefield Road, kind of formalizing the existing path that is along Middlefield. And those are some examples there.
Interject, there's, just want to highlight, Charlie did mention sidewalk in a couple areas. I just wanted to highlight, as written in your staff report, those are really focused in on those properties that are going to be that are designated as multifamily, related predominantly to the adopted zoning changes by the city council and SB 79 properties. So those are highlighted there. Glenwood, Laurel, Bay, Ringwood, which are actually outside of the town. Those are county frontages. Small piece of Ravenswood, as well as Valparaiso. And then also noted is El Camino Real is kind of circled because there are separate studies that have been ongoing that are going to be formalizing the recommendations for El Camino Real. So we didn't want that to kind of take precedence over what we are doing, because there's going to be ample opportunities for additional input on El Camino.
I want to make sure I heard you correctly. On Marsh Road, you're contemplating building over the water drainage.
Yeah, so in our existing master plan, bike ped master plan, a shared use trail was outlined on Marsh Road, and the concepts that were prepared at that time were to basically put that facility atop the channel. And when the town did significant improvements to the channel, it was designed to allow for that to happen. That being said, there are probably regulatory and other hurdles
I was
in
going to say,
doing
who has
so.
jurisdiction over that?
It's the town's channel.
It's ours.
Yeah, but there are regulatory agencies that kind of oversee those things. So it's a town facility. And at the time.
May I
yeah.
just interject? What Robert is saying is true. When we designed the improvements to keep the walls from collapsing in on itself, Fish and Game and all of that was involved. But we did design it so that if we ever put a lid on it, there would be a big gap, right? It would not be a tight lid, so that if it flooded, it was able to come out and everything. So we were very mindful of how it was designed. And that is something that we really need to do. I saw a young man with his little skateboard trying to make his way up Marsh Road through heavy traffic. You know, he was clinging to the fence with his little, and so it's a dangerous thing.
Couldn't agree with you more. I observed the same thing 2 days ago where there was a young person, fortunately he had a helmet on, but he had this much space.
Right, and these cars are going right next
And
to
I was
him.
like, yeah, it's an accident waiting to happen.
Right.
So if that can happen, that's a great solution.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I mentioned the groups of intersection recommendations, and these again are just potential improvements that need further kind of engineering judgment during like the design phase. But see some examples here: advanced yield markings, high visibility crosswalk, pedestrian refuge island, accessible ramps. Next slide. Signal improvements, hybrid beacon, roundabout, and another version of a rectangular flashing beacon versus a pedestrian hybrid beacon. And here's a map of those intersection recommendations. You can see that the majority are actually along El Camino Real. But as we noted, that will require coordination with Caltrans. And then a number are also recommended along Middlefield Road, particularly near the schools, and then a few along Valparaiso, one at Atherton Ave, and then a few along Alameda de las Pulgas. And then now I'll switch to bicycle facilities. We focused really on safety, so closing gaps in the existing network. We focused on proximity to schools, and then, where there were higher traffic roadways, looking for kind of safer parallel routes that might better suit cyclists on local roadways. And yeah, we also tried to enhance access to destinations such as the town center and library, and create crosstown connections, and where we could, such as along Middlefield Road, separate users, separate bicyclists from people driving. Next slide. So this just is a snapshot of the different types of facilities that we're recommending. Again, that shared use paths that I mentioned along Marsh, bike lanes along Atherton Avenue and Glenwood Avenue as well, buffered bike lane along Alameda de las Pulgas, and then a few bike routes adding to what is already existing. And next slide. And then so we show physically separated bikeways. There's we only have one recommendation along Middlefield Road to upgrade the existing buffer area near Encinal, and add a physical separation at those locations. Next slide. I already talked about these two as well. Next slide. And so here's the map showing what I just talked about. You can see Alameda de las Pulgas, buffered bike lane, Atherton Avenue, standard painted bike lanes. And then in orange, those are the class 3 bike routes along the residential roadways. And then along Middlefield, you can see that dashed line. That's the physically separated section. And then the short segment along Glenwood as well.
All right, so as we mentioned, you saw on the map there, or the recommendations, that there were recommendations for both bike and ped facilities potentially on Atherton Avenue. The right-of-way is rather wide and can theoretically accommodate both, but there's a lot of various frontage improvements, people that are have landscaping and other things. And so the potential impact of constructing both on each side of the street could be rather significant, because you're talking about widening the roadway, to add a few feet to provide for the bike lane. So that's probably about 3-4 feet of widening, plus then another 5+ feet for the separation related to the pedestrian facilities. And so that's a lot of space to take up. And so we're seeking feedback on kind of a preferred approach. Do we want both on that one street? Do we want to put the pedestrian facility on a different route? Or another alternative is, we put a widen the roadway to put a bike lane on one side, keep the shared use facility on the other, and have the designated walkway on that side. So you're kind of balancing how much space you're taking. So that's that hybrid approach. Just leaving it as a Class 2 bike route and putting pedestrian walkway on either one side or both sides. So we're really open to that. We're just trying to share that what we heard from the public is that it's desirous to have these east-west connections. There really aren't many streets that you can just go from one side to the other without having to jog around. And so I
You
think.
want to discuss the specific Atherton Avenue?
Well, I'm going to say that before we jump into the next phase of the presentation, if there are any questions on the recommendations and how we got here, my suggestion is we answer your questions, we finish the presentation, answer questions on those last set of slides, gather public input, and then you as a committee can comment, dialogue, and then provide us with what your collective thoughts are on all of the recommendations, particularly this east-west connection thing, policy recommendations and whatnot, and then give us the information so that we can take that, solidify your recommendations, and ultimately bring that forward into the recommendations in the document and to the council.
So I do have a question about that. In August, before school started, the town conducted pedestrian counts and bicycle counts. Atherton Avenue had 92, Selby Lane had 78, and Oak Grove had 203. Why doesn't Oak Grove have pedestrian improvements when these other streets do? And, if you look at Selby and Atherton Avenue, those have 21 feet right of way on each side of the roadway. And Oak Grove has 9, maybe. There's absolutely no hazard to pedestrians on either of those streets. And there's a lot of open space. The biggest hazard is all the construction vehicles. So that's my first question.
Well, I can speak to Oak Grove in particular is a very narrow road where there's not a ton of room to do much, but we do have a little segment of Oak Grove just to connect into the driveway at Menlo Atherton, where we would look at, again, this would need more detailed kind of engineering judgment to look at the available right of way, but to have a walkway on one side just to access the school.
So, as you mentioned, there's a school that has over 2,000 students. This survey was done in August before school started, and it was twice or more than twice of these other streets. And I can't imagine what the number is during the school year. It's got to be triple that.
Yeah, and I guess the other thing I'll say about Oak Grove is that we are recommending a bicycle route along that roadway. And we specifically or explicitly say in our report and on the maps that the bicycle routes should, where feasible and where the public demands it, consider traffic calming elements along those as well. So I think, really ideally Oak Grove could be a shared use environment where cars could interact with other users, and that those cars are going due to traffic calming and other elements like at very slow speeds.
I'm going to paraphrase what I think you're really saying, which is we need more focus on Oak Grove than we've heard. That's not a criticism, but it begs for greater attention than we've heard. Recognizing it as a much narrower pathway and there's not an easy solve.
And
Yeah,
if I can just ask one quick question, do we have any idea how much it costs to do a pathway, or mile, or half mile, or I mean, just the plus or minus 50%?
I don't have for a new pathway. I can tell you that the cost that we paid just to do sidewalk repairs a couple of years ago was about $25 a square foot. And that's just for the concrete work. And so we're probably at least twice that to do a walkway. That being said, and it'll be coming forward in the policy recommendations, is our first order of business is figure out where these pathways and bike routes are important to us. The second is working on prioritizing those, but then there's also that on that implementation side, there are significant opportunities in various areas where redevelopment is occurring, and most jurisdictions require frontage improvements along the frontage of property that's being redeveloped. And so if you have a property on a street where you're designating something to happen, let's say like the pedestrian walkway, that property owner, as they do that redevelopment, is spending however many millions of dollars to fix the house. They're going to dress up their frontage. As part of that frontage, they would put in that walkway. And so that's how you kind of start incrementally building that. And there, we'll get into kind of the details of what those walkways and stuff look like later in this meeting and well into the future as we develop standards for them. But there are opportunities for things to occur incrementally in addition to us getting grants for projects.
So I've been told that a class 2 bike lane on Atherton Avenue is dead on arrival at the city council. So
Well, so this is your I'm going to say after the public feedback and you talk about what you would like to see in terms of recommendations, whether there are adjustments to the plans that we have here, whether it's adding, modifying the recommendation or crossing one out, that's certainly up to the committee to come up with your recommendation on what we should do. Up to this point, we've shared what we've heard from the public and kind of how we've altered the recommendations or the alternatives that we originally had. And so there were various alternatives that kind of were presented initially with that public outreach. We heard certain things from the public. We scaled a bit of the recommendations down. And you have opportunity tonight to hear more from the residents as well as to provide your own feedback.
all right.
So if there, I'll take that. So not that long ago, I think it was in 2020, we redid the bike lanes on Atherton Avenue. There were certain areas that we were able to to widen enough to accommodate a buffer. And so we have buffered bike lanes along certain stretches of Middlefield Road. The recommendation here is to kind of take those areas that are buffered and kind of step them up by putting in plastic delineators or something else that'll turn it into a class 4 in those areas. There, in those areas, let's say like going up towards Watkins or all the way to Marsh, there isn't necessarily enough room to provide that additional space. So I think if you look at the image here, this is at Glenwood, where we have the rapid flashing beacon, and you can see the buffer. It's actually, I think, on both sides of the road there, but it breaks apart as you get towards the intersection, right? Because the cars will merge into to the right. And so in those areas that we do have that buffer separation, that's the recommendation, is kind of to step that up. And that's something I think the committee heard from the students when they came through and did their presentation on the walk audit. The shared use path, as I recall, would be a minimum of about 12 to 14 feet wide. And so that shared use would end up being on one side. And you get into that, well, how much space are you going to take up? So yes, and you just need to be cognizant of what that impact is.
The 12 to 14 is a regulated width.
Yes.
Gravel, you can't run on pea gravel. You have to end up running in the road on accident path, and so having a standard surface that's runnable and walkable, that's not making pretty certain, messing up people who use this. I think that's high priority.
Okay, so again, this isn't comment time, this is a question period.
Okay.
All right, so let's go into the programs and policy recommendations.
Yeah, so kind of to complement the physical infrastructure recommendations, we also have program and policy recommendations, which sort of with the goal of cultivating an environment through education and enforcement and encouragement, and also actual city policy that encourages those modes, not just from the physical infrastructure perspective. And so I'll just briefly talk about some of the programmatic recommendations, which are more, the first few are education focused, specifically around schools. And then the last three are more just recommendations for the town to be a little more systematic and routinized with how they report on collisions and also conduct enforcement. So yeah, just real quick. The first one is this mini Main Street and other education events. That's safe routes to school focused events. And so the town would have to really just lean on those partnerships with existing schools for that one. And then new infrastructure education campaign. This could be, again, would have to be a collaboration with the town, schools, and other stakeholders to really, as new infrastructure goes in, making sure that the public is made aware of that intersection and its benefits and how to use it. For example, such as like a class 4 facility along the separated bikeway along Middlefield. that could be, in theory, combined with an education campaign around it to promote its use and safety for all users. And then the third one is also Safe Routes to School focused, just really just encouraging school involvement in events such as walk and roll to school day and things like that. And then the last three I mentioned is a recommendation for the town to collect an annual collision report on collisions that involve bicyclists and pedestrians and motor vehicles, but just to follow closely track that and then reevaluate and look at the recommendations and the priorities in the plan based upon that. And then the second to last one is bike lane and parking enforcement. So parking enforcement around illegal parking, such as we saw near Encinal School in the shoulder. A lot of people illegally park near the school there. And also there are certain locations, such as along Encinal as well, where people are parking or driving in the bike lanes. And then, next slide. I'll pass it back to Robert.
Yeah, okay. And so this is kind of, again, I think we included a copy of the, what do you call it? The town's ordinance with regards to what's permitted in terms of improvement in the right of way. And so what we will want to talk about are whether or not, again, as development occurs, we should require frontage improvements, what those will look like. Daylighting, making sure that there's enough visibility around corners, between driveways. We have a lot of flag lots that are coming down that that property owner only has that narrow, like 20 foot coming into the roadway, but their neighbors may landscape really close and kind of block some of that visibility. And even folks that have their own driveways have a lot of shrubbery and other things that may impede visibility. And so we'll have some conversations around maybe modifying some of that. We will need to develop new street standards. We don't really have many now. We don't have much, but so we will be formalizing standards for sidewalk. That includes single-family residential like Lindenwood, having standard plans and drawings that actually have a continuous pedestrian path that goes around driveways, as well as for multifamily where the driveways need to be a bit bigger. And in those areas, the potential for curbside bioretention facilities and bulb outs and that kind of thing. So these are things that we're working on. And then I am curious with regards to trying to strike the balance on the walkways. We need, by law, as we develop a walkway, it's going to be ADA compliant. And so it has to be firm and stable. At the same time, we have the desire for something that is more natural looking. And so one of the things that we were looking at is, I'll call it not permeable concrete like we have out here, but more of a stabilized gravel where there's like a plastic grid that kind of holds the majority of the gravel in place, and maybe some kind of binder for that top surface layer. So water can still filter through it because we do want to maintain the pervious nature and that kind of softer look versus concrete on these on these residential streets. Or the alternative is to look at something like the pervious concrete, which is a little more expensive, but if it's colored like what we have out here, it kind of blends in with that more natural thing. So we're going to be coming back as we start developing these standards. They'll kind of go hand in hand with this. So there's the what do we want where, and then there's the what does it look like. That makes sense. And so kind of following on that, right now in our municipal code, People are allowed to landscape right up until the edge of the road. And so with that, the requirement is that the first 3 feet is 5 inches tall, up to 5 inches tall. You're allowed to have no plants, gravel, as long as it's the area has to be pervious as it's developed. But we don't say what the material is. It just needs to be pervious. So if somebody wants to have pervious pavers, gravel, et cetera, whatever their aesthetic is, it's acceptable to the town as long as it meets these criteria that we have outlined. But we do also allow for vegetation. So whether that is, could be anything from ivy to low ground cover to spotted ground cover, grass, whatever it is, that first 3 feet is restricted to 5 inches tall. After that, the next 3 feet is limited to 3 feet tall. And then from that point, at 6 feet, you're allowed to have trees, shrubs, and everything else that grows higher. The caveat to that is that for trees, we want it to be the full-grown tree so that you don't just plant your redwood at 6 feet off the edge of the road, because that thing's going to grow huge and take up that space, right? So when we look at that tree planting, we want it to be measured at it when it's fully grown. That trunk is still going to be 6 feet off. So the considerations that we're asking for are, should we be looking at potentially changing these recommendations so that regardless of whether or not a walkway is designated, should that first 4 or 5 feet be clear without vegetation, pervious, at the discretion of the property owner, whether it's gravel, pavers, whatever it is. And you see that wide variety right now when you drive down Atherton Avenue. There are folks that have gravel, there are folks that have grass, there are folks that have pervious pavers. And so should we have that first area designated as a clear zone, both for visibility as well as potential use by the public? And then we do have requirements with regards to mailboxes, postal, parcel boxes, call boxes, and other obstructions that are, again, supposed to be 6 feet off of the edge of that approved roadway. That includes, as we widen a roadway, that stuff's going to be kicked out that much further. And then the designation of the Postal Service requires that they have drive-up access to the mailboxes. And so in that area, our expectation, what we're telling developers, is that first 6 feet, so that in the current standard, as they approach that mailbox, needs to be something that the Postal Service can drive on. Okay. Yes.
Are you open to comments at this point, or do
We are
wait?
open to questions.
Or wait.
And so, like I said, this is kind of some things to think about. That picture that you have right there is an illustration of our standards. I forgot to mention that we do have a requirement at the corners with regards to visibility. And what that is basically measured from, you take the edge of pavement on one street and edge of pavement on the other street as you get to an intersection point. You measure back 30 feet, and then you draw a projection line between the 2 points. And that area cannot have anything right now that grows more than 3 feet tall. One of the things that we'll be looking at is whether or not that projection line should actually be pulled back, either a certain distance off of that improved roadway, or B, be measured at the property line so that it provides a lot more clear visibility around that corner. So with that, we'll move on to next steps, and we'll try and breeze through this stuff so that we can go to public comment, your comment, and get the feedback that we are seeking.
Yeah, so next steps with the project is we are working on cost estimates for each of the recommended projects, and as well as prioritizing projects. And then we will also in April be starting on concept designs for select projects. And then the draft plan will be drafted sometime this summer, May and June.
All right, this is the point you've been waiting for.
Okay, so do we have more questions? So we'll open it to public comment. Discussion. Any more questions? Okay, I'll open it to public comment.
Before we move to any public comment in the room, I do want to make a quick comment for people online. For those of us who are those of you who are on your computer, again, if you'd like to make a public comment, please raise your hand using the React menu on your in your toolbar. However, we do have a couple of people who are joining us via phone tonight. I have discovered that if you are joining us by phone and you would like to make a public comment, you can still raise your hand to me by dialing *9 on your phone. And that way I can still unmute you so you can make public comment if you would like to.
Do we have anybody in the room that wants to make a comment? Please come up and introduce yourself, please.
Woody Shackleton, Atherton resident. When I moved here 20 years ago, they were redoing Selby. I live right on the corner of Selby. And what they put in on the edges was gravel. Gravel was, the nuggets were so big, you literally couldn't walk on it very comfortably. Certainly couldn't jog on it, barely walk on it. So I think we should give consideration. If we're gonna do something other than sidewalk, make sure it's walkable. It's comfortably walkable. I was a little confused when we talk about what the homeowner can do in the stretch, assuming if we decide to do a walkway for a whole stretch, then the homeowner doesn't have any option. It's going to take up that right of way walkway. Or homeowners, we're going to have a sort of there'll be a uniformity, right? I mean, is that what we're thinking? Uniform walkway all the way. Okay. Okay. I'm advocating for, I guess, a consistency on walkways. I also had a question, like when I come out of my driveway, if the construction truck is parked there, I can't, it's hard to get out and turn left, but I don't, when there's no parking sign, it seems like we ought to have some, that map that you're showing couldn't have high fences. Seems like we shouldn't allow cars to park right where you're on those intersections. It's never had an accident, but
So there is the daylight law. They can't park within 20 feet, I believe, of
20 feet seems like a reasonable.
approaching intersection. So that exists, but nothing to protect driveways.
In the driveway, no. I'm on Logan, Selby. So I should be able, I can tell them they're. That was it.
Through the chair, we'll take that feedback and pass it on to code. They do review construction operation parking plans, and that's something that they can highlight as they review that there's not supposed to be parking within the first 20 feet on the approach side.
Any other comments?
Hi, Patty Lugers. I'm president of the Lindenwood Homes Association, and I just wanted to come and give a comment. Given some of the things that were said tonight, and reiterate that Oak Grove should really be considered more of an imperative to this pedestrian, I don't know if it's a walkway or at least clearance for pedestrians to be able to walk it safely. As both a motorist and a pedestrian, Oak Grove, I really appreciate the homeowners who have abided or adhered to our standards. There are several homeowners who don't, and it makes it difficult for us to be a safe pedestrian on Oak Grove. So I think some of the problems can be solved by just maybe working with the code enforcement officer, and so that we have clear walkways or clear paths. It doesn't have to necessarily be a finished walkway, but at least dirt or some kind of path that we can walk on. And that goes for many of the streets in Lindenwood where shrubs are now actually over the street. and on corners there don't allow us to see oncoming traffic. So anyway, I think we should address that for pedestrian. And as a motorist, it's also nice to have the pedestrians not on the road. Although runners, I understand your situation with being a runner, but for pedestrians, it's very important to be able to have space to walk on that's not on the road.
Okay.
My name's Claire Starry. I've lived on Selby Lane for 43 years. I have a couple of concerns or questions about, I guess, a proposed walkway. We, as somebody already mentioned, they already put a walkway on Selby Lane on both sides. So is this going to be an addition to that walkway that's already there, or is you just going to redo the walkway? That's my one question.
Robert, can you address that?
No, I don't think there's an official walkway there. There is
There was, yes.
gravel along
Oh.
a good stretch there.
When it
but
was
it's-
put in, I can tell you because I was there, when it was put in, there was a walkway and the water, I can't think of the, for the water to drain. So, yeah, whatever. So it was a walkway. It was considered a walkway. It was sand and then gravel. Unfortunately, the gravel has moved onto the sand, which it does make it very difficult to walk. My dog always insists on walking on. But no, my comment also on that was after it was put in, nobody maintained it. And my concern is if you put money into putting another walkway in, hopefully at this, over the same one that was there, not taking another 6 feet of my property, that you will maintain it rather than just having it disintegrate over time.
Robert, who is responsible? I know in Boyden Park, the residents are responsible for their sidewalk.
So what I've seen is everybody
If
has,
you could, 1 second, please.
So generally, our code requires that people maintain their frontages. I'm not in tune specifically with what was required when that area was done. I think probably,
But if there was some future improvements, the homeowner would be required to maintain it.
I think that the simple answer is it depends. And I'll qualify that this way, is that right now folks are responsible for their frontages. If somebody were to, for example, put in compliance with whatever changes we make, put in permeable pavers, for example, to their aesthetic, that would be something that they would be responsible to maintain. The town wouldn't do that. If the town were to do a project, there's a large likelihood that we may be either A, negotiating with the property owners, or B, taking on that responsibility.
so if you put sand in front of my property, I would be responsible for putting more sand. As it,
I think we can have that conversation offline if
okay.
you'd like.
So that's my question is because I didn't ask for it.
Yeah.
You took away some of my landscaping,
Mhm.
put in the swale and the walkway, and you left it. And it's a disaster if you look at it. My other point is having a lot of construction around me, walking around Selby Lane School and watching the people park. It's almost impossible to not have to walk on the street parking. And I'm not sure how this walkway and the parking would be taken care of because I think if people across the street, they're parking not parallel, they're parking like straight in. And they've got trucks and those are actually going onto the street. So you actually have to go onto the street to get around them. So I do think it's important to consider the parking aspect of whatever you do. And I guess my final question is, are you planning on widening Selby Lane? Or are you just planning on putting in because I think Selby Lane is wide enough as it is. The wider the street, the faster the traffic goes, my experience.
I haven't heard of any plans to widen. So
Okay, thank you. That's my comments. Thank you.
thank you.
Oh, I got this letter from you. Talk about,
That's later.
Next item.
okay.
Do we have any more public comments? And wait, we've got one more person in.
Hi, I'm Mike Barsotti, resident of Selby Lane, 42 years. She's been there longer. But so I have a couple of questions. One is on the, also a bike lane recommendation.
I don't believe so.
So through the chair, there is an existing bike lane from El Camino
There is for
to
some of it,
Oakwood.
yeah.
To
That's,
Oakwood.
that's what, so no
That-
change to that. The other thing is, at one point, I had heard that perhaps we'd eliminate all parking on Selby Lane. Does that change?
There's nothing. at
6
this
months ago or something that I had seen. Okay, good, okay. And the other thing I'd like to do is, we're looking at question or a point, looking at, making it safer. It's always better to be safer. But how do we rank compared to other cities? So I think we can overkill stuff on it. Because I walk every day around Atherton Avenue, Selby Lane, Austin, and it's not a problem. And the last point I would make is, somebody made a comment about a survey that was taken about traffic patterns and such, and it needs to be taken not in the summer, but during Selby there is. And also, and when looking at what it's like 9 months a year, not 3 months a year. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we have online comments.
Yeah, Mr. Coningstein, let's start with you first.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. I had comments, I think in 6 parts, so I'm going to try to go through them in rapidly. The first is, so I'm an engineer, and one of the things I like to see in a consideration of traffic and public safety is a calculation. So when you're encouraging bicyclists to use certain roads that are potentially dangerous, it really helps to have a calculation to shows whether this is a net improvement or a decrease in safety in terms of potential bicycle car collisions. And I think an example of that in particular is, the road down Marsh, where as it is currently, there's no way for a bicyclist to pull over when they have a number of cars behind them. I would avoid that at any cost, and I would never recommend my daughter to take that. So why is there no bicyclists are banned from this road until there's an actual improvement? That's point one. Point two, Selby Lane, yes, there are hazards along this. I don't think construction vehicles are the total hazard. I mean, my neighbor, I think, pointed out a good one, which is when they park, vertically and force people to walk on the street. But mainly, I think it's the rough stones and the flooding that are the source of problems with pedestrian traffic on this road. Item 3, so we have, can we encourage bicyclists and at the same time incorporate common sense into these recommendations? For example, routes that we prefer people take across, like, let's say, whatever logical north-south Atherton, would encourage perhaps making Atherton easy to get to between Austin and Elena, or Selby and Barry, right? Because those are the things you have to traverse in order to get across Atherton. Point 4, Oak Grove data. I think this was a really interesting result of this study. And I completely agree with the concerns that were brought up here as to what to do about that. Let's see, point 5 was a beautiful example of a walkway, I think, is what the property owner did at the corner of Selby and Atherton, where they put in those cobblestones. It's a walkable surface. It's not appealing as a drivable surface. And so it's a clear separation between those two use cases. And finally, I think Robert raised this point about street standards that you see on, let's say the eastern side of El Camino, as opposed to the western side where there aren't. And frankly, I think there's parts of Selby Lane and Atherton Avenue and that are kind of ugly. And yes, it's a trick to figure out how do we involve our residents to perhaps pay for these as they go or as improvements happen. But it's sad that Selby Lane, because it has almost that construction level gravel, which is 2 inches in size, is so hard to walk on. So thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Vujovich, if you'd like to go next.
It's actually Cindy Voyevich. Hi, he's here with me as well. I just wanted to comment on the proposal of a permanent speed hump. If it is anything like the one that you tested, I would like to say that I don't think that's an effective use of trying to control the speed there. If you're going to make us come to a stop to go over such a huge bump, then you might as well just.
So sorry, that is actually related to the next item. If you would like to hold that comment until after the staff report related specifically to speed humps on Selby Lane.
Okay.
So is that the end of it? Okay. So we'll close public comment and then it's back to the committee for discussion and recommendations. So have at it.
So have at it. Robert and I have already talked about this. Chief and I have talked about this. So a couple of different points. I passionately believe that we need to have, my terminology will be bad, but a no planting zone between the edge of the street and a certain distance towards the property. You will know better than I do whether that should be 18 inches or 24 inches or whatever. But allowing someone to plant 5 inches, it doesn't make any difference, frankly, if it's 5 inches or a foot. If you're a pedestrian, you're not going to walk in someone's ivy. You're not going to walk into somebody's plants. The best example I can think of is the intersection of Stockbridge and Austin, where on two of the, I'll call them the eastern side of that intersection, the planting is right to the edge of the street. Stockbridge is a relatively busy street. And the only way you get through there is if you're walking on the street. So I realize it would require a change in code, but I would certainly advocate for the change in code because we are a big pedestrian town. Bicycles are important. I'm not taking anything away from it, but we are a town where lots of people are out walking. And I think they need to have a real sense, a real safe environment and a sense of safety as well. And they need buffered space to feel safe. So I strongly advocate for us thinking about that change. The other point I would make as well is when you look at what's about to happen to the SRI land and the USGS land that has just been purchased, and I'm going to get the numbers wrong, but there are going to be 600 or 700 housing units that are going to be built there.
On each one.
On each one.
Yes.
I mean, we have two huge parcels that are about ready to be developed upon. The construction is going to go on for 4 or 5 years, maybe more. And I think we need to think really, really clearly about Middlefield Road and safety on Middlefield Road, both for school children and anybody else traveling on it, because we are going to be having very heavy construction traffic for the next 5 years. And in its current state, it's not safe. So I would say let's make moving forward on Middlefield a real priority.
I agree with that. I think we ought to have like 5 feet of hardscape right of way. Absolutely nothing. Like Steve said, if it's ivy, you can't walk on it. And we see that in a lot of places, especially in Lindenwood.
I think there's a piece of that, though. I don't know whether it's 3 feet or 5 feet or what the number is, but something that encourages the pedestrian side, but discourages traffic parking there.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
If
make
you-
it
If you park a
permeable.
vehicle or a truck or something, and just I'm gonna pick your word, 5 foot, then you're forcing the pedestrians literally onto it. Right, so there's a number that I'm sure these smart people figured out. I agree that if it's other than grass, even then,
So, oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Walk on through that, and you're like, oh, this property's done, and then you go. And there's
Okay, let me make some overall comments. I think there is a great interest in pedestrian improvements. I think there's very little interest in bike lanes except near schools. And obviously, alternatives 1 and 2 use calming devices, and we've had a very strong negative feedback on calming devices. So I think those are dead. Alternative 3, I question. I'm a bicyclist. I ride a commuter bike. It's outside there. I ride about 600 miles doing errands, and I ride about 5,000 miles a year on recreational. And I ride Atherton Avenue 2 times a week. Its current state, it's not unsafe because it's straight and people can see when they can pass. And as much as I'd love to have a class 2 bike lane on there, I think we can survive with a class 3 bike lane. And if people want to cross, they can go to Valparaiso for a class 2 bike lane. And that's where the schools are anyway. It's just, I've heard numbers for class 2 bike lane on Atherton Avenue, and I went, wow, I'm going to have to get a lot of donations to do that. I think it's also important when we look at these streets like Selby and Atherton Avenue to do what we can to reduce the flooding. So it is convenient to walk and not have to go out into the street. So the bioretention features. So those are my comments.
I just had, well, I can only think of one more comment, which is I was a little bit disappointed that there was going to be no change on Emily Avenue and Elena Avenue for bikes when the cars for schools back up. Bikes don't really have a way of going around them, so it's not really a bikeable street during school drop-off and pickup. Also not super walkable on some parts of the street. Mainly just that little along Sacred Heart before the entrances to Sacred Heart. So on Emily Avenue, there's pavers, but those pavers are so large that when you step in them, you twist your ankle.
Okay, so what do we need to do in terms of some recommendations? Class 2. If in a perfect world, I'd say yes, but there's opposition to it and it's not unsafe at this point. And, okay, consensus.
It's wide enough for vehicles and bikes to maneuver around each other. Is that correct? You
Well,
probably get more than I do.
technically, they're required to give you 3 feet of space between your handlebars. They have to go over the center line to pass you, but it's a straight road. They can see long distances. So it's typically, and traffic is not that heavy that somebody's going to try to, I call skin you. So I would be comfortable recommending it go to stay at class 3. I don't, what does everyone else say?
Well, the reason I don't bike outside is because of straight roads and bike lanes that are not protected from,
Yeah,
because everybody's looking at their phones and their
I understand.
devices on straight roads and they just end up in the bike lane and then you get almost skinned.
So do we have a consensus to,
Yeah, I think that if it's exceedingly expensive, generally likable. I mean, I run on there, so as in the in the traffic lane, so it's not so unsafe.
have it? Steve? Okay, so we can do class 3 on there. Class 3 on Atherton Avenue. No change. Correct. Correct.
I'm sorry.
I don't
I'm
know.
seeing Ross's thing
So
that he's not
it's-
hearing me,
it's-
so I
it's
forgot to turn
on
on my mic.
Frederick, Green Oaks, James. I don't know if there's a purpose to it.
Okay, so where would you recommend that we have or don't have? And so Oak Grove is an important access to the school. James is a main road in and out. There's the James Gate there. And so the question is whether or not you want both of those and you want them linked, and that link would be
But these are essentially just
they're class
roadway
3
markings.
roadway markings and a couple signs, yes.
So that would be fine to have it as
Okay.
published.
And then the last one that's on there that's probably a little more impactful is whether or not there should be a bike lane on Glenwood. And we didn't hear any feedback from anybody, either plus or minus on that.
I haven't heard anything. I never go to Glenwood.
Okay.
It's not convenient. And, we get a number of people that commute from like across the freeway. They come up Ringwood. They cut over to Oak Grove a lot of times and they'll go Oak Grove to the train station or into town. I don't see people using Glenwood, quite frankly.
All right, so then we'll,
Although, we don't have the number
no.
count. So
And so,
I
Go ahead.
see bicyclists coming up Valparaiso and continuing across this times.
So you could get students coming from Sacred Heart, Menlo, just keep going straight on Valparaiso. So
I mean, the traffic on our section of Glenwood is a lot lower than the other end. And so it's at your pleasure as to whether or not that's a class 2 or class 3.
class 3.
Okay. So that covers the majority of the bike stuff. On the pedestrian side, I'm going to repeat what I heard and then you can tell me yes, no. I think that for the most part, the recommendations that are on here to have a walkway on one side of the street on Alameda, Atherton, Selby, Valparaiso, and then around Sacred Heart, and on the streets that are fronting, let's see, that would be Alejandra, Emily, and Elena, as well as Park, to have some sort of walkway really to facilitate the school, getting to school. The same thing on Encinal Avenue, which we heard feedback from through a variety of sources. Formalizing the walkway and making a permanent walkway along Middlefield Road and on Fair Oaks Avenue. Fair Oaks Lane, having a walkway. And then I'm trying to see what that last little piece is just, so Station Lane, we have a lot of feedback on, as well as the last stretch of Watkins from the tracks up to El Camino. So I didn't hear anything against any of that from the committee. It's just a matter of what does it look like and what is it made of so that it's usable. So as far as the plan goes, these items will stay. Again, there are recommendations for actual concrete sidewalks in front of those multifamily projects. And those are limited in terms of location to those that are designated for high density. Okay. And then I think that generally speaking, there's really not much in terms of feedback on the intersection stuff that I heard.
No, those haven't been, since it's just pedestrian, active transportation, it doesn't go into.
Well, this is the intersections of the comments from, or the recommendations are striping crosswalks.
Right.
And
We're not talking about traffic signals generally.
No, this is just the pedestrian stuff. There are, just on a side note, there are a couple of studies going on related to traffic signals that are separate from this. So, okay. So that's what I heard on the plan. So I think the team is good with that. So things can be updated and recommended. On the policy side, I did not hear anything really against the educational aspects. The PD already does a bit of this with the schools. The second bullet on there is really as we make improvements to really get the word out that we are doing this and this is, the benefits of it, and be aware that there's a rapid flashing beacon or whatever it is that that we're putting in. So that, and then we'll be developing standards for these things and coming forward at a separate time to kind of flush out details, and appreciate the feedback that we've gotten. One of the things as we look at this, and I'm trying to parse a little bit of the conversation that happened. There's a desire for a clear zone on the side of the road. However wide that is to facilitate pedestrian traffic. However, if somebody wants to put that closer to their fence, which there's only going to be the occasional one that wants to do that, is to be able to allow them to do that, but allow for that low ground cover if there is that alternative space for pedestrians, and somehow tying it into the neighbor who might have it in the front. I mean, the tricky part is trying to figure out something that is durable enough and accessible enough to meet state law, while allowing for property owners some flexibility in terms of the aesthetic and its location. So that's something we're going to have to figure out. Yes, sir.
So I know the house you're referring to because sometimes I walk by it as well, and their little walkway is very charming. I would advocate for a standard distance between regardless of whether someone wants
just some sort of
if somebody
clear,
wants to put in a supplemental sidewalk closer in the property, that's up to them. I would just say for the sake of consistency,
having something in the front, and
the
then if they
distance
want
between
something
the
else.
edge of the road, Ian, should be the same everywhere.
So then the secondary aspect that we will need to figure out, and it's likely going to be another dialogue thing, is that that designated walkway area is not for parking. So if somebody wants to allow for parking, the concern is, well, how much space is going to be required to provide that parking space, right? So your typical car is about 6 to 8 feet wide, depending on how large your vehicle is. And so maybe the requirement is if you desire to have parking, that area needs to be a minimum of 12 feet, something like that. And then, because there are people that want to have parking in front of their property, whether for their use, their guest use, or their, what do you call it, service staff. Okay. So we don't need to worry about having different things on each side of Atherton Avenue. It's just going to be either walkway on one side with clear zone on the other is pretty much going to be it. So in essence, it's going to be the same thing on both sides. And then any comment about clear zones at corners and driveways? Need to be. Okay.
You say that again.
Oh, I said they just need to be enforced.
Okay. With that, I'll say thank you much. We appreciate it. And with that, I think we're going to move on to the next item.
So Chief, do you want to continue?
No, I think we're out of time.
Thank you, gentlemen.
And
No, I'll continue.
okay. All right, let's press on. So now we're on to
Good evening, committee members, your chief of police. And we'll be concentrating on just Selby Lane tonight. So our presentation is a review of proposed traffic safety improvements along Selby Lane, and we're looking for your recommendations. The recommendations tonight are to review the data and analysis that I'm sure you all have reviewed in detail. Provide recommendations to council regarding the evaluation and proposed installation of a three-way stop on Selby Lane at Serrano, the permanent speed hump near 87 Selby Lane, permanent raised speed hump crosswalks at two existing crosswalk locations near Selby Lane School. And then the last one is lane narrowing with striping from El Camino Real to West Selby. So just a bit of a background. The town has received some periodic concerns and complaints about speed and traffic safety issues on Selby Lane. In the last 5 years, we've received 4. That includes the current one that we were addressing recently. And because speed enforcement is governed by California law regulating use of LiDAR, roadway decisions are primarily based on engineering standards, collision history, and operational need. And that takes us into the California speed trap law, which basically says that speed limits have to be justified by speed studies and based on the 85th percentile, which means in basic terms that 85% of the traffic monitored on that roadway is adhering to the speed limit or close by. And in the last several years, several traffic safety studies have been conducted on Selby Lane. In 2018, it showed the critical speed, which means 85% of the traffic is traveling at 31 miles per hour in a 25 mile per hour zone. In October of 2024, before the temporary speed humps were put in, speed study was conducted that showed the critical speed was 34 miles an hour. During the installation of the speed humps, it was 31 miles per hour. And then after removal in 2026 of January, it was 30 miles per hour. So basically our critical speed along Selby Lane is 30. And then looking at our collision history and enforcement review to evaluate the roadway safety, we're very fortunate throughout town, our collision picture is very low. Fatality accidents are extremely rare, luckily. Serious injury collisions are rare. The majority of our collisions are non-injury or minor injury. Along both sections of Selby Lane, the average number of collisions we experience per year are 2. All have been minor, with only 4 involving minor injuries. Luckily, no pedestrian or bicycles have been involved in those collisions. In January 2026, we conducted, in response to concerns of speed on Selby Lane, 8 different traffic enforcement deployments with our motorcycle officers, resulting in only 4 citations being issued and 13 warnings. And again, as I mentioned, in the last 4 years, there's been 4 resident complaints. So what we concluded from that is the collision patterns did not indicate speed-related safety issue enforcement. Enforcement is occurring within legal limits, and the roadway is not exhibiting characteristics of a high-speed problem. Often when we're dealing with speed complaints from residents, it's their perception, which is their reality, right? We have to then take a look at that concern and that perception and say, is that true, or are we dealing with objective information, which is why we do the speed studies. So several efforts have been undertaken to address the resident concerns. The temporary speed humps, as I mentioned, were installed in December 2024. The speed humps were removed in January 2026 following resident survey and committee feedback. Speed studies conducted before and after the installation showed the critical speed was in the low 30-mile-per-hour area. And radar feedback signs were installed at multiple points along Selby Lane. These measures improved driver awareness, but the engineering data showed limited measurable effect on actual speed, on vehicles operating speeds. So I wanted to take an analysis of each of the 4 recommendations. The first one being a resident recommendation for a 3-way stop on Selby Lane to Serrano Drive. And it's not simply the town making a decision that, okay, we're going to put in a stop sign. You have to do a warrant study, because there is liability on the town and others if we make those decisions without having a warrant study that basically justifies it. So you have traffic engineers that take a look at different causal factors, collisions, sight distance, et cetera, to determine if a stop sign should be installed at that location. And that would be one of what we'd be looking for recommendations from you tonight, if that warrant study should be conducted. The second one, as I mentioned, is a proposed permanent speed hump near 87 Selby Lane. Not long ago, myself, Mr. Ovadia, a couple committee members, Councilmember DeGolia, and Mr. Rodericks, we met with a few residents at 87 Selby Lane, and that was where the recommendation came from for a permanent speed hump be installed at that location. So we'd be looking for your recommendation from that. The third recommendation is the installation of raised crosswalks near Selby Lane. The advantage of the raised crosswalk is, kids are small, so it raises the people up so drivers can see. It also, in that area, because it does become, it's like an orchestrated circus when they're dropping their kids off and picking them up. So it really does make drivers pay attention as they're coming over those humps. And so we do see value in the installation of those humps. And the last recommendation that we're looking for or making is the installation of narrowed fog line. And a fog line is the white line that you see on either side of the road. It's designed to let drivers know that that is the edge of the roadway. Studies have shown, and I'm sure you've experienced too, if you've been driving on a narrow road or one that has been narrowed, psychologically it will make the driver slow down. It's a very cost-effective means to help traffic calming, and it's also one that we are supporting. And then just a real quick thing on our underlying findings. It's based on the engineering studies, enforcement data, and field observations. Selby Lane does not demonstrate a systemic speeding problem. The street's collision history is low and not speed related. Prior speed humps had minimal effect on driver speeds. State law limits the enforcement options available to our officers, and additional traffic control measures may improve perceived safety, but may not produce meaningful reductions in operating speed. And I think just from my experience here and talking to our traffic sergeant who has been working in Atherton for over 32 years, Selby Lane in itself, much like most of our other streets, we're not seeing specific problems there. Do you occasionally have speeders? You're always going to have occasional speeders, but the vast majority of the traffic is adhering to the speed limit and the law. So I'll stop talking, and then take your comments.
Okay.
Questions.
Committee members have questions.
Where were the speed humps before?
There was one set at the school, and the other set, Robert, was it near? Well, I thought there was two. There was one, maybe, I guess it was just prior to the school zone.
Yeah, we had one prior to the school zone on this stretch of Selby. We did have two sets on the other Selby.
Oh, that's correct.
87.
Oh, that came from the resident.
Residents.
She. And then I believe this likely suspect here. Yeah,
Let's do it at the mic.
yes, when we're ready for public comment.
Okay, we'll open it to public comments.
I'm Woody Shackleton from Atherton, live on Logan, right against Selby Lane. When we met and you asked me if I was okay with the speed bump there, I said I was, but it's depends on where that driveway was, or we were talking, it's closer to Logan Lane. For that, if you get down right across from 87, I like that less because I think we're going over it. But I looked at it, I thought, it seems like the speed bump should be between the two stop signs. It should be Austin. Put it like halfway in between. That seems like the most rational traffic call.
Yeah. Anyone else that wants to comment?
What are you going to do?
Mike Barsotti, Selby Lane, Atherton resident. I like your analysis, you backed it up. I think, to me, if you're going to put, I would put it school.
Thank you. And one more.
Just have a comment. It's Claire Starry again, Selby Lane. I just have a comment. The speed bumps you had put in, the temporary ones, caused a lot of problems. And I'm assuming if you put in the speed bumps, as you call them, they wouldn't be as hard to go over because you practically had to come to a complete stop to get over that without destroying your car. I just wanted to ask if that.
So yes, the speed hump it's much more, if you've been over a speed hump like they have in Redwood City, it's much more of a smooth transition. One thing to keep in mind with either the temporary ones and even with speed humps, I think location is important to consider because with it is going to come noise. You're still going to have braking. You're still going to have like landscape trucks going over. You're still going to have that jostling. So you are going to have noise, which has been some pretty strong critical feedback from some of our residents with the speed humps, which is why they were removed in several locations.
And okay, we'll close. We'll go to online public comments.
Mrs. Voyevich, if you'd like to go first.
Hi, thank you. Well, based on the information that the chief has just given us, my question is, why do we even need one if everyone is within a reasonable amount of speed? It is true there are always going to be people who go too fast, but the majority of us that live on this road do follow the speed limits. And I found the one that was temporary to be, quite a problem. As she earlier stated, you do have to come to a stop. So I could see the one being installed near the school, but I really don't see the need for anything else further down the street. It's already a busy road with lots of things going on it. I just don't see the need for anything more. So I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Mr. Coningstein?
Hi, I live on 130 Selby. I'm a car driver and we bicycle from time to time as well. I'd like to pick up on the comment about clear and straight that was made earlier. I think that's actually a really interesting observation because as a driver, when you see clear and straight, it often sort of signals, oh, it's okay to go faster. And as a bicyclist, it says, oh, I can see that I don't have to swerve into car traffic to make things happen. Part of me part of it makes me wonder, number one, as a stop sign forces me to stop. Like, I mean, I love our police department, but I hate to be pulled over for not stopping at a stop sign as a bicyclist. And things like a little like marker in the middle of the road that says you have to go around this is easily visible on a straight road to a car and a bicyclist, and says you have to pay attention here. It's not exactly like a traffic circle, but it's something that says you have to go around this marker. And I raise this particularly because we have observed a couple of times that I guess the county sheriff from San Mateo County has sped down Selby Lane well in excess of the speed limit. I timed them at one time doing around 60 miles an hour. And this was based on crossing, from one part of our property to the other, while our wife and I were actually on Selby Lane. So I think having something that marks an intersection that requires going slightly away from the straight line would be a useful thing. Finally, I do worry about these notion of narrowing the traffic lanes. I think, I agree with the principal rationalization. It is confusing as to what does that mean for what happens in that part of the road that is across that white or dotted line. Is that for parking? Is it for bicyclists? Is it for both? And that to me is a little bit confusing. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll close public comments and back to the committee for discussion. And I'll start off. I've got thoughts on this. And let me go through each item. A stop sign at Serrano and Selby. So I spent some time on Selby the last couple of days. That stop sign would be 1/4 of a mile from the other stop sign. And Serrano Lane has really excellent visibility to the left and right. So I personally think this is trying to be used as just to reduce traffic. And I envision that it's going to be actually less safe with a stop sign than it would without, because we're going to get people. I know every bicyclist is going to blow through that stop sign. Not me, of course. And we're going to have cars do it, and people are going to be expecting somebody to stop, and they're not. All right. Permanent raised speed humps, crosswalks. I like the idea. As the chief mentioned, makes short people taller, more visible. I missed one. Okay, speed hump at 87 Selby Lane. That is about 150 yards from a stop sign, which to me is kind of like, why do we want a speed hump 150 yards from a stop sign? It doesn't make sense to me. And there's been a lot of mixed reactions from the residents on Selby about speed humps. I like them, I don't like them. Let's see, speed humps. Lane narrowing with striping. Right now, we don't have a problem with speeding. And I don't know if you're aware of it, but the police department has a new tool that they can do a traffic survey while they're sitting at their desk and find out how fast everybody's been going yesterday or a year ago. And so I think we can monitor and see if speeding becomes a problem on relatively short notice. But, in a lot of respects, a lot of these things are to fix a problem that doesn't exist because we don't have speeding on the road. So that's my comment.
I would agree with what you're saying, Jerry. I think the only thing that sticks out to me is the idea of the raised crosswalk that mixes with the speed hump, speed bump. The speed bump that the town installed were just the wrong tool. Parking lot bumps. There is such a thing as a speed hump, which is engineered to go over at a certain speed. So if it's engineered for 15 miles an hour and you go over 15, it's not nearly as speed bumps there. I think if there's something that we could do on Selby, it would be to increase in some ways safety around the school itself. And given the parking situation down there, I imagine there are a lot of young families or students, probably not by themselves, that are trying to cross Selby Lane. So that area seems like a place for this elevated speed hump crosswalk combination thing. Other than that, I think the statistics speak pretty well for themselves, that these other measures are trying to solve a problem that doesn't really exist. 87 Selby sounds like the right place because that one person didn't come to transportation committee meetings last year and hear the person that lived on Glenwood that said it's loud. He didn't mind it, but it was loud. So if that's the criteria, I don't know that quite passes as the right place to put it. Serrano and Selby has got great visibility. It hasn't been a problem in the anybody but the 60 years I've lived in. So I don't know that we're solving a problem either.
I originally liked all the ideas, and after listening to the residents and guys, there's two that I do still really like. I like the fog line, and to Ross's point, I totally agree that when there's a fog line, it's confusing to a lot of people that they think that the to the right of the fog line is the bike lane. So my suggestion would be to put in a fog line and put diagonal stripes. I know the fog line's only going to be like probably 6 inches or a foot in, maybe. Put a horizontal stripe so it doesn't look like a bike lane, and then it's not ambiguous. And then I do like the raised crosswalks for the school children.
I think if there is a fog line that mixes with ultimately decided to delineate a walking space on our side, that's fine. But I think less paint, the better if we want to keep with town.
As everybody else said, I think the raised crosswalk at the school is a no-brainer, right? Yes, there's the height thing, but it also kind of alerts you. You are in a school zone, and I think that's a very valid tactile reminder to be careful and slow down. So no-brainer. I'm a big advocate of the fog line. It's inexpensive, and it will prompt drivers to drive more closely to the center of the road, and that is going to create both genuine, real safety from pedestrians and also a sense of safety for pedestrians. So I would certainly advocate for that. The other two items, the data does not support that we have a speeding problem on Selby Lane. So if we do the two other things, let's acknowledge we're doing it as a concession to the people who live there because they are passionate about it, but we are not doing it to solve a problem that statistically doesn't exist. So sometimes maybe you do things just because that's what the people who live there really want, in spite of the fact that it's not really going to solve the problem in a meaningful way.
Okay, so what I'd like to do is just do a vote on each of the 4 items. And then we can. So first item would be a 3-way stop at Selby on Serrano Drive. And all in favor? Opposed? I'd say no.
I'm opposed.
Opposed?
I don't have a strong point of view.
I didn't do.
Well, you're supposed to be running on Selby Lane, not
I don't
Atherton
run on
Avenue.
Selby Lane because I have to cross Stockbridge.
So if we go 2 and 2 abstentions, That won't pass.
I'll give you an oppose.
Okay. All right. We got
I'd say
three.
To get something to pass.
We got
with-
3-0.
have to have
You got three opposed.
Yeah. We got
Oh,
3
so that's
opposed.
3 against, so
Yeah.
that's not. a
Three
pass.
against.
Okay. All right. Next item. Permanent speed hump near Selby. I'll vote no.
At this, are you talking about the school now?
No, that's
Oh,
different.
You're talking about 187.
87 Selby.
I have a quick question. Are we doing this backwards? Or say that no until we vote it to pass and we need 3 to pass?
It would be it would be easier to say, is there anybody that supports the item?
Okay.
And then
Is there
that way
anybody
you
that
can count
supports
how
this
many
80
that support it, and then
Okay.
it'll either have enough to say yes or.
Okay. Does anybody support a speed bump at 87 Selby? All right, forget that one. Permanent raised speed humps, crosswalks at 2 existing crosswalks near Adelante, Selby Spanish Immersion School. Does anyone support that?
Support.
Support. Okay, that's unanimous. And then narrowing, lane narrowing with striping from Oakwood to Selby Lane. Who is in favor of that?
Support it. The fog line,
The
right?
fog line.
The fog line.
Fog line.
So
So that's 2.
2. So
Yeah.
that
support it.
you support it? Okay,
Because
then,
I think it's going to speak to the pedestrian
Can-
safety side of it.
Yeah.
so, okay.
So we
Can
got
I-
three.
That one
We have enough-
passes.
Okay.
Okay.
I just think
All right.
it's also at night. It adds illumination at the end of the road because there's not a lot of street lights on Selby. I mean, I wish
Agreed.
we had them along Alejandro.
Okay, we're done with that.
Yeah, so we're going to take this, we're actually in the process of finalizing the design of our annual street maintenance project. We'll be incorporating these items into the design, and then the council will either award the work or not. So we're going to get it into the project so that we can get it constructed a little more cost effectively because there's asphalt work and there's striping work. And so that'll allow, thank you for the feedback. We're able to incorporate that into the summer's project.
Is that, my agenda is just on one page. Do we have it? Police traffic.
They weren't online reports, no.
No. Can you just send those to us? Okay. Okay.
Just
Okay.
that the police officers are doing very good work.
Per usual.
And just, I did a ride along the other day.
Oh, you did?
Yes.
Cedarbucks.
Did you make any arrests?
I didn't have any handcuffs on.
Handcuffs or uncuffed?
And then you're all welcome
I
to do a
did, I
ride
did
along.
a morning ride with,
I would recommend that you do ride along. I mean, it's a great way to see how we work and
we
how we
pulled over
don't
one
work.
person for no driver's license. Ran a stop sign, no driver's license.
All right.
All right, I move to adjourn.
Second.
All right, once we're done.